Altering the genetic makeup of animals and crops can make food more nutritious and make us more productive as a nation. That's what the government says, and it's going to approve so-called gene editing.
There's a pork chop heading to American supermarkets that was edited with the exact same technology used to create the first gene-edited human babies. You won't be told which one it is. There's no required label. By law, there doesn't have to be. That's not a meme. The US government approved CRISPR-edited pigs for people to eat, and no rule requires the meat to be labeled. So the internet did what it does. They're editing the food to edit us. Frankenmeat will give you cancer. This is how they normalize gene editing humans. Here's my promise. I'm not going to call you crazy for any of that. I'm going to take every fear, line it up against what's actually true, and give it 2 scores out of 10. How likely it is, and how bad it'd be if it were real. Because those two are 2 almost completely different numbers, and almost nobody keeps them apart. Start with the boring true version, because you can't weigh a thing you don't understand. This isn't science fiction, and it isn't coming someday. It's already approved, and it's a short, specific list. In 2015, the FDA approved the first genetically engineered animal for food, a salmon, edited with a growth gene from a different fish so it grows to size in about half the time. Critics called it the frankenfish. It got a mandatory label, sales struggled, and by 2024, the company had closed its last farm. In 2020, an edited pig, engineered to remove a sugar that triggers a meat allergy in some people. In 2022, cattle, edited with CRISPR to have short, slick hair so they tolerate heat better. And in 2025, the big one. The FDA approved CRISPR pigs edited to resist a devastating swine virus called PRRS. They could be the first gene-edited animal to actually reach the food system at scale. Here's the current status, because it matters. The FDA cleared them in April 2025. Canada followed in January 2026, but they are not on US shelves yet. The company has said it won't broadly sell in the US until it also has approval in key export markets like Mexico and Japan to protect global pork trade. So this is a coming deliberately slowly story, not a secretly already everywhere one. One distinction matters for everything coming up. The 2015 salmon is transgenic. It carries a gene from another species. The newer one, the cattle and the latest pigs, are gene-edited. Scientists tweak the animal's own DNA, often to copy a change that already happens naturally in that species. That difference is exactly why the rules treat them differently, and it's where the real story lives. So here's the floor. The edited animals are probably safe to eat. The system quietly built around them might be the actual problem. Now let's take every darker possibility seriously, one at a time. This is the big one. CRISPR is a gene editing tool, so if it's in your food, isn't it editing you? The instinct isn't dumb. That's a reasonable place for the mind to go. But for this to edit you, the editing machinery would have to survive your stomach acid, get into your cells, and target your genome, none of which is how eating works. You digest DNA the same way you digest protein. You break it into building blocks. You've eaten the intact DNA of every plant and animal you've ever consumed, and none of it rewrote you. And the editing was done to an embryo in a lab years earlier. There's no CRISPR left running in the meat. Eating an edited pig no more edits your genes than eating a regular pig turns you into a pig. How likely? 1 out of 10. How bad if true? 8 out of 10. Very bad, very unlikely. 2 different numbers. Watch that gap all video. This one has a true fact at its core, which is what makes it powerful. The CRISPR pigs were made with the same basic technique as the gene-edited human babies born in China in 2018, an experiment the scientific world condemned. So the comparison isn't invented. But for this to be a plot to normalize editing humans, you'd need a coordinated intent the evidence just doesn't show. The same tool isn't the same act. A scalpel in surgery and a scalpel in a crime don't make surgeons criminals. Editing livestock embryos is legal, reviewed, decades in the making. Editing human embryos for birth is banned almost everywhere and was universally condemned. One being normal doesn't quietly drag the other along, and the wall between them didn't move when the pigs got approved. How likely? 1 out of 10. How bad if true? 7 out of 10. The fear that an edited animal hides a novel toxin or allergen we won't catch until it's too late. And it's a legitimate scientific question. Changing DNA can change which proteins an animal makes, and proteins are what trigger allergies. That's exactly what the safety review is meant to check. 2 things push against catastrophe. First, many of these edits don't add anything foreign. they tweak a gene the animal already has, often copying a mutation that exists naturally, so there's no novel substance to react to. Second, and I won't hide this, when the FDA reviewed the slick cattle, it did find unintended genetic changes from the editing. It concluded they didn't pose a safety concern. That's the honest version. Not nothing unexpected ever happens, but unexpected things are looked for and so far judged minor. How likely? 2 out of 10. How bad if true? 8 out of 10. The Frankenfish nightmare. Edited animals breed with wild ones and the change spreads through nature. This is the most legitimate of the headline fears because it's already why the salmon is regulated the way it is. The edited animal would have to escape, survive, breed, and pass the trait on. That's exactly why the salmon is raised in contained, land-based tanks, engineered to be sterile females so they can't reproduce if they get loose. Land animals are different. A barn pig isn't escaping into the wild and establishing a population the way a fish in a river might. The fear is real and species-specific, high for an escapable, breedable fish, low for livestock. How likely? 3 out of 10. How bad if true? 6 out of 10. So the headline fears mostly land the same way, bad if true, but the conditions for true don't hold. Now for the part that actually matters, because once you clear those, there are risks where the likelihood number doesn't stay low, it climbs. Rule change. Everything above asks whether the animal can hurt you. Everything below asks something subtler. What happens when a powerful technology gets folded into the food supply faster than the rules around it? Watch the numbers move. This is the one I'd actually have you leave with, not a theory, the current rule. The 2015 salmon got a mandatory label, but the newer gene-edited animals? Because the change could have occurred naturally, no special label is required. The slick cattle? No label. The CRISPR pigs? No required label either. Though here's the honest nuance. Companies are free to label the pork if they want, positively or negatively. So it's not they're hiding it from you, it's subtler. Whether you're told is left to each company's choice, rather than guaranteed to you as a right. And the consumer research cuts an interesting way. When people are told what it is, most are fine with it. One survey found roughly a 12-to-1 support to opposition ratio, citing fewer antibiotics and better animal welfare. So this isn't a public being tricked against its will. It's a public that's largely okay with it, quietly losing the choice to know. Which raises the obvious question. If support is that strong, why not just label it? How likely? 7 out of 10. How bad if true? 5 out of 10. CRISPR is precise, but not perfect. It can make changes it wasn't aimed at, and it's documented here. Reviewing the slick cattle, the FDA found unintended genetic alterations from the editing process. It judged them harmless, but the existence of the finding is the point. The tool does sometimes do things you didn't ask for, and our ability to catch every one is still maturing. It's a real, live scientific risk. The kind that rewards independent checking rather than taking the developer's word. How likely? 5 out of 10. How bad if true? 5 out of 10. Think the seed patent fights, but for livestock. These edited animals are expensive to create and are owned and patented by a small number of companies. As editing becomes the way to get disease-resistant herds, farmers can end up dependent on whoever owns the edit, buying patented breeding stock on the patent holder's terms. Conventional animals still exist, so it's not locked in, but the direction of travel, consolidate the genetics, license them back, is real, not a fantasy. How likely? 6 out of 10. How bad if true? 6 out of 10. This is the quiet engine under everything else. The lighter the rules, the more they lean on one idea, that the edit could have happened naturally, so it doesn't need the full review or the label a transgenic animal gets. Sometimes that's fair, but could have happened naturally is a flexible phrase doing a lot of regulatory work, and it's the doorway that lets each new edit move faster and quieter than the last. Nobody has to be corrupt. You just need a fast-growing industry, a small set of overseers, and a standard elastic enough to wave most things through. That's how oversight thins out as volume climbs, not by scandal, by drift. How likely? 6 out of 10. How bad if true? 6 out of 10. Read the scorecard. The headline fears, DNA editing you, the human editing plot, frankenmeat cancer. Score terrifying on how bad and right at the floor on how likely. That gap is the anatomy of how a food fear runs away from its evidence. The dread is real and earned, and the mind slides the likelihood up to match it. Now look lower. No label, off-target screening, corporate ownership, The occurs naturally loophole. None of them make a scary thumbnail, but those are the likelihood numbers that climb. 5, 6, 7. There's a name for what those quieter scores add up to. Capability without accountability. Not a villain, not a plot. A genuinely useful technology. Folded into the most intimate thing you do, built so you can't see it on the label, can't easily audit the edits, and can't choose otherwise. The animal on the plate is probably fine. The thing you're being asked to swap for, a control system, is trust. So don't fixate on whether the pig is dangerous. Ask for the boring things, a label so you can choose, independent screening with published results, and a clear standard for what occurs naturally actually means before it waves the next edit through. That's not anti-science. Gene-edited animals might genuinely be good. Disease-resistant herds, less suffering, less antibiotic use. That's exactly why the system around them deserves to be visible. I'm not telling you what's possible. Almost all of it is. I'm telling you where the odds actually sit, and where they don't. Before you go, which fear did I miss? Drop it in the comments with 2 numbers, how likely out of 10, and how bad if it's true. The whole point of putting a number on it is that you're allowed to argue about the number, so argue with me. The sharpest takes get scored on screen in a follow-up. I'm reading.